Hi, for this example, what we're going to do is we're going to solve an inequality that contains fractions. Anytime that you have an inequality with fractions, you can treat it the same as you would an equation, and there's multiple ways of doing this. You can leave the fractions and just find the lowest common denominator and combine like terms, or you can clear fractions by multiplying by the lowest common denominator. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all of my denominators. This one's 15, 1, 5, and 1. So the lowest common denominator is going to be 15, because I can divide 15 by 15, I can divide 15 by 1, and I can divide 15 by 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and multiply every single, basically I'm just using the distributive property. As long as you multiply everything by the same number, it keeps your equation or inequality balanced. So I'm going to take and multiply everything by 15. When I do that, because I can divide 15 by both 15 and 5, it gets rid of my denominators, so then I just have an expression that's just linear, and it makes it a lot easier to solve. So with this, my 15s would cancel out, and I'm left with negative 34 minus 30x is less than or equal to, and with this one, we can do 15 divided by 5 gives us 3, and then 3 times 4 gives us 12, x plus 1. Now we have a nice linear inequality where we just have the one variable. There's no fractions, and I know it's a lot less scary for most people to not have the fractions. Like I said, you don't have to do this step. You could just get everything as fractions with a common denominator of 15 and then combine like terms. So with this, what I'm going to do is, because I have variables on both sides, I'm going to go ahead and move the variable that's smaller. I could just as easily move the 12 over. You just have to remember that when you have a negative coefficient that you do have to change the sign. So you'll get the same result either way. So with this, the 30x would cancel out, and we would be left with 42x. And I just realized I forgot to multiply this one by 15. Some of you were probably watching and going, is she going to multiply that one by 15 as well? Sorry about that. So this also should be 15. With this, what we are going to do now is I'm going to take all of my non-variable terms to the opposite side, so I'm going to subtract this 15. And when I do that, I get negative 49. Remember that since they're the same, I really add them and keep the sign. And then my final step is to get x by itself, so I would divide both sides by 42. With this does reduce because both 49 and 42 can be divided by 7. So this would reduce to negative 7 over 6. And a lot of times this is where I see a mistake because of the fact that it is written where it's pointing to the left. When you draw your answer to this, remember that your variable term has to be first in order for it to tell you which way that it's going. So the best practice is to rewrite this with the x first, and remember that the mouth of the inequality has to face the same way, so that mouth was open to the x, so the inequality has to still be open to the x. So we really have x is greater than or equal to negative 7/6. So negative 7/6 would be a little bit past negative 1. And we would fill it in. You just approximate where it is because it's really negative 1 and 1/6. And so we're looking for all values that are greater than or equal to that. So our solution set, 0 is the easiest one to check. If you plug in 0 into both sides into our original equation, if I plug in 0, I would end up with negative 34/15 is less than positive 1, because if I plug in a 0 here and a 0 here, they just cancel out. And this is a true statement, so the set containing 0 does make sense. And again, you can write it in set notation as x such that x is greater than or equal to negative 7/6 if you need to. This is only if you are required to write it in set notation. In interval notation, we would start with the negative 7/6, and it's everything up until positive infinity. So be very careful when you are graphing your solution that your variable term is first. And And like I said, the interval notation and the set notation is just if your course requires it. A lot of teachers, especially if you're in an introductory algebra class, this is a fine way of writing your answer. As always, thanks for watching. Please check out my other video content, and if there are topics that you need me to address, please just let me know.